on the lurid whims of evil shall we day in what faints the heart and bludgeons the conveniences common to what is the mind's pleasure to rehearse. It was another 9th of AV of infamy, Jerusalem proper in the Israel of the nations. The sun had set early without any intimation at dawn. Warnings had seemed to only professor a jaundiced sense of recollection with a strict prohibition assigned to apathy. Christians were available for consult for these persons wishing to ask, how do you know? As they seemed to exhibit the perspicuity of sight ahead that was not unlike what Yeshua, this one who Jewish historian of acclaimed Flavius Josephus referred to as the Christ, displayed while speaking the prophecy about the 1st century temple destruction. In 70 AD his prophecy to the letter, the jot and tittle fulfilled. By 2 millennia separated. So what could they possibly share in common? Erectors were asked 4 years ago when her first service was set for a christening bon voyage community and world greet. 'Twas a matter of happenstance, or kismet luck, if you so choose. In the least bit planned, scarcely was she, said the big and burly man surrendering the champagne bottle that would soon impact with the main throughway. Sharing something other besides this 20th century anniversary, I dunno. Chirped he then when, truth is. One had to advance the clock by a few years into this very day at hand to so clean the answer. Really one's destruction pinned up against the others creating until these few later years from her erecting when fates would seem to align and sacrifices would meet with the abrupt halt. So you're bent on receiving a clue yet, yeah. Here's your clue as 12 would seem today that the blooded moon, from the sky suspending low just over the head of Yerushalayim might have shared the burden that was to make you aware. Perchance 'twas over-reported that the comet coursing through the morning sky, and on the day of temple's christening only in the United States, on a concave eastern trajectory across states and from Florida to Pennsylvania to Maine, with the pieces from it reported as falling on 3 impacted regions among them named, respectively per state, Zion and Bethlehem and Salem, so over-reported that they were scoured out of memory. So to turn a deaf ear to a red moon on this day was pardonable as in still piping hot memory faculty was the verified report that comet discharges these 4 years later and on this very day had landed on both Eliyahu Hanabi's cave and on Jerusalem with scientists en route to see what they could discover. So even the paranormal with unidentified flying matter given their 2 cents worth when sitting out from the mountaintop that was our clue. We've heard town cries caller alerting all to the fact that was missed or that had went underreported. Your clue finally with temple talk hither and forthwith dominating this portion of ubiquity and bandwidth. In a date that would be conspicuous for adding to its history a certain messianic claim from a key personage of our tale. The date was Tisha B'Av, or the 9th of AV. Circa year 2074, Gregorian calendar. Here's how Judah Mack and company met this day. If persons choosing amnesia as in last year, the war year no longer thought of as both 10 years past and 40 years future, to sow defang and neuter armies into global direct attacks and to in the wildest imaginations advantage a ghostly notion of triumph by continuing to pursue and countenance the out-nuanced idea of holding on to peace without sacrifice then so to adopted these, without a catering to sensitivities of still malleable individual human hearts, a contingency of only adequate risk without reward against their better interests and for an annihilation option. Thus willing to unequivocally endorse the most deceptive plot and war machine ever devised against mankind. Our wartime narrative as these chronologies have advanced with the passing of time has made fewer references to individual militaries as they went to their respective armies, navies, air force and special ops conflagrations even though, after 42 months, under peace treaty hostilities such has since in so short a time greatly made of the brush fires the engulfing forest blazes that themselves were in the minds of military commanders and generals looked to as analogous as were depictions of same hostilities as quite the unfortunate metaphor. With fomenting palpable dread in an expectation of a motherlode of a cyclical incineration atop of the bottomless supply of burning coals yet outstanding, the basic human instinct to appease and to preserve where sensical and entrenching and ensconced diplomacy as the greater good men still yet know while descalating and diffusing the maritime machine unto a utopian dream vision for mankind. If only mankind become a machine could somehow an uninhibited, appeasing no. Erected temple travesty on the notorious 9th of AV, year 2074, the temple erected by men, assailed by a tyrannical despot of despots in concerted attacks in a series of them choreographed to from the inside manipulate and outside infuriate the unquenchable thirst of the protracted and ginned up battles, Maccabees, Judah Maccabees, thus far in our chronology our at-home soldier assigned to Jerusalem as boots on ground ready combatant who was suited up but in the least bit on the moment attired in full military combat gear, he was on scene again. One might perchance say from the more auspicious tide in another reenactment or simulation of significance in historical mention from none other than Hebrew scriptures in another Maccabees brother tag team instead of single individual as with Judah who'd have them travel along with him anywhere he'd set foot anyway. He verily and uncannily with the enemy's battle plan blueprint locked inside of him as an indispensable gift yet had a family member in the way even minuscule factored into the matter that was his wartime engagement in any way. To what degree he might have had a vested concern, but unto what specific assignment was for now the moot point for him as the prerogative to remain incognito was also unto the merited bliss in the heart of any one said person, factoring in especially for one Israeli ops and intelligence agent, indispensable to our immersive tale, dear readers still to catch up with him too. A recent quote by Krishnachev, that she was weighed down suddenly by rumors with teeth in them, theoretically and on paper touched off by Hussein's Midas gold notwithstanding, this was still peacetime after all. A general had promoted Judah to handman as acting lieutenant of forces and extended arm and hand of his field commander. Scarcely intimidating when passing you by but a holy terror and taunt in a man while squaring with you from on his feet as just the same was in his mysteriously strong hands was at least 1001 reasons to flee, such was the voiced appraisal coming from the field general requesting Judah's greater promotion, as told the young man subordinate to him with the latter making good on extension of promotion on the subsequent day. We can always use another Irish Jew in the front lines. His joke had went in reference to Judah Mack. Look here. From the encanopied rear of an all-terrain vehicle, Judah, after taking a second look, surveying hard left and then right, panning with laser beam focus, said the fiercely determined eyes in the center of which appear the inverted crow's foot brow indentation, with and then without binoculars, he said, yeah. Got it all mapped out. Maybe. I see the future immediate, who cares, and thanks be to God at the same time. To attempt to interrupt the young man, only in the present company, considered young in comparison to most of these men assigned to him, was exhibited as marked futile. Only one or two of the younger men around Judah's same age unnecessarily took silent exception as ones newly subordinate to him, he continued, characteristically drawing in cool wispy breaths reminiscent of some kind of subconscious salivating. As soon as he completed a few sentences, Judah assembled the men. Okay, he started. You've seen we've been successful like this on the outside of the city. Listen. As I said to you before, communication lines are, for whatever reason, severed at least here in Jerusalem. USA, UK and IDF, with some Russo, defectors and other armies together, with largely the disarming weapon then as we act on intelligence of Mossad and some Russo defectors. My outside mountain inside playing strong as stone here, the brass unsuspecting us here and think that we'd halted on the Temple Mount center and far less do they think that the element of surprise comes to them from the inside, so we deceptively grant them a foot inside. And if they, amongst all places, know that we shall seek to make refuse of them from just outside of the temple and during this, the grand temple sacrifice event, then this only means they've been tipped off by defectors against me, against you, against Israel herself. As you know, we're acting on wicked good intel here, and, as you know, that so-called half point of an expected tenure, so to speak, has finally arrived on the day. It's for them to know what peace feels like and for us to know what she looks like. We have the element of surprise on top of the element of surprise, yeah. He paused to address a question posed to him. That's right, Martel. He raises his finger to the air, rigidly stretching it in front of him and between the space with Martel, angling it even further in front while raising his voice a few decibels louder. The man believes that we are wholly susceptible. Caught off guard and unsuspected and conditioned by the climate of peace, several years ago initiated by the fall. Having public opinion firm on his side, even here in Jerusalem, and coercing premature abandon of our campaigns against Hamas and other Palestinian forces. And here he hopes to throw open the doors to Hezbollah and the others, on our eastern borders, north and south. Judah, has anyone opposed this plan? Began a towering man, as deeply tanned and thickly featured in the facial features as was Judah, somewhat stronger and far from faster and more agile, hands to feet. 8 days after her fourth Hanukkah she was furnished not quite 4 years ago. One might think it too risky. Continued Reuben. And for the very reason you say, when admitting that it is during the sacrifice hour of temple service. On Tisha B'Av, I might add. Judah looked to the others and, through an incredulous tone, said, Reub. Is our man here serious? You're not gonna turncoat on us and join the picketing lines, are you, big bud? Was that us overreacting or was that us extinguishing fires on the Temple Mount some 4 years ago? We wise in acting on solid intel too then. Judah looked long at the man. It almost dwarfed his entire body and shielded him from one side. He switched, remaining sober and with wheels of rumination rummaging inside of his head, and, hunched over his map at the same time, since turning his gaze toward another man as though to signify his checked non-enthusiasm temporary as it might be, he stood straight again and still the large man with the piercing gaze, easy only so much that his thinly drawn back lips would betray. What would you have, Reuben? Judah replied, both disappointment and exasperation and stopping shy of perturbation or affront, taking umbrage. You have an invite by them to formally ask when is the more convenient time. Maybe to lay out the gourmet spread and wine glasses, is that right? Listen, we're acting on intel here, and you know of our policy regarding such in this area and under the Prime Minister's order. It doesn't look like it just on the moment, but we're up against a closing window of time. Believe me on this one. We cannot assume that they bluff or merely call wolf once again. Reliable informants from the past found to be true are talking on this one. This is real with all of sinew, tendril and claw in it, Rubes. Why do you think ahead of time we have enforcements en route? Not to assist with the campaign, but prepared to supplant our unique leg of this mission. So if it's okay with you, we'll go ahead and place our faces forward, yeah. The big guy was the recipient of a looping armed hand swat worn as chummy as Maccabees led Reuben to his awaiting battalion. What came with the territory was inevitable, and to flower while budding from the vine that was generated stress, his superiors reminded. Having a few more tips to share at the more convenient time, Judah's only come away with the line repeated within a certain context during that chat. From that point it's our lives or theirs, really. And we're successful at war and thriving while remaining staunch, fiercely dedicated and dedicated to our own side. Brush wind sounded against the truck outside as the men hunkering and sitting inside its closed-off canopy while gathering items attested with squawking crows snoring.
Obviously someone who's present and hearing my voice.
Men in the forefront of them were heard talking and grumbling in the distance among themselves. Judah, he checked himself and would only seem to intimate the conciliatory air of consideration and wonder why he'd done so, seeing that he'd short-circuited some vocalized contention that had erupted, which was a good thing. Judah's catching on when his superior intimated a required plan of action for that very second, which called for a meeting, if scarcely a confrontation. He pulled Reuben aside and conversed with him in private, and returned to address the others. Okay, Judah Mack said. For the sake of clear communication and the fostering of positive morale, let us keep level-headed throughout this campaign. It is the ideal plan that even Commander King David Ben Jesse would smile on. Ben, Martel, my God. Significantly he toward each man nodded, committing, here is the way we are to perceive, but only by thinking of this. Already confirmed the report. 5 dozen of them travel together and are en route, and we have only 1 dozen fewer here. Surprise number 1, it is their daring approach and entry on temple ground without a single artillery report from us, if things go according to plan and without trucks trapping them in like fish in the barrel. This is sea capturing them inside of the balloon, yet inflated on the surprise number 2, it's just a very blitz against them. This is like inflating the blood with breath in number 3, Judah popped his hands together in a characteristic motion and exclamatory gesture of piqued enthusiasm. Standing Martel more erect and taller, this is the popping of the bloom as we shall pursue in one direction and chase them out in 7. Began Martel, and we more than compensate for any surprise in weapons, odds or numbers of soldiers because of the defection. Oh Allah ho why, yeah. Hearing this abrupt shrieking from the rear of the truck and cacophonous disrepair within such close proximity rattled the nerves of some. Quotation mark, that's right, damn right. Not all defectors have changed into IDF uniforms and travel with us, but have instead infiltrated the enemy's companies. One of them, a spy, as you all know, has seen what I've done to him. Martel outstretched his rolling fingers and, with torque and force, he intimated the crushing of a soda can at the end of his ratcheting wrist and rotation motion, against his forearms twice repeated, making the same ratcheting sound with his mouth, snapped his spine, I think. And not just the head. Judah, signifying his untempered zeal with those wispy exhalation sounds sounded through his teeth, he said, yeah, I still hear that today. Excited me still, jettisoning outside of his sockets. These should be less suspecting. Look. Fact is we go to extreme measures, and, regardless of how we do today, tomorrow, the next day, however, God knows. These battles going on for years shall continue under Hussein's confederacy for quite some time. Yet everything should be considered as engagements compounded possibly unto the greater fat mobility and realization of attainable goals, one company after another, inroads toward the attempted annihilation of a people is what he would have. But as goes one weaker amongst our brigades, as one mightier than any of them, as the Lord declares, the weak amongst us shall go forth mightily as King David. We shall fiercely attack, we shall valiantly defend, we shall honor the Lord of hosts who does preserve his people. They one vain radio in for air assaults by the time we advance on them, unless, of course, we leave not one of them standing. Enter our mind, we have some of our own forces available, soon, none what's been uncovered in their plan, and, in Master's plan I mean the valiant eagles referring to the United States of America, with encroachment of Nasserine Confederate forces in Nasser himself, they shall lend Godspeed to our cause to again, but, as in the year 1967 in the Six-Day War, she'll see once again his mighty Jacob as friend for our beloved Jerusalem. Some of our numbers upset that they didn't go abroad to fight the Confederate forces, instead having to face a smaller numbers, maybe even less exciting exploits amongst our military with the more enhanced technologies daily used by then, but I say what a tree that should be what a honor to be able to fight and defend right here from your beloved homeland, unfortunately as it is that we have to do so. Reuben against his large map traced finger alongside I deleted delineating line. Here's again your entry and eventual attack zone. Things go according to plan. Here's your recourse in plan B and its recourse in plan N. He stretched his hand to make a circular motion against the map. Plan C quotation mark. Lead your men wickedly valiant. As it were. Martel, here's your coordinate pointer. You come up from below here and let me see here, and then you come up from below in eastward initially before entering through the distant gate facing deeper east. Right here, he tapped against the map, canny corner, so to speak, back against southeast Temple Mount extensions that's newly constructed. Micah and my squad, we are the first to wave it and alarm them from the outside in the most incordial salute, over top from high above. Just like the drills back at barracks. Remember that, Micah. Unconventional but still are we, right. How are we to? When Field General gives the word, that's when, my friend. Okay, Judah, do you have any answers to questions I have yet to think of? Ha is right. Reuben will meet at the time appointed. And remember, larger at stake if we err on this one, our any disclosure or any slip of tongue to any living soul, then we run the risk of forfeiting all and maybe even more. It's your company's men finally, we'll toast each other later. Judah shouted out to the truck's driver, we are off now. You are the cue to the others. Time to camouflage our trucks inside of the copes and then time to pray. Yes, the essentials. Then we pray. Even before the intel word you knew, Judah, you knew confidently that Nasser would be with these troops today. Smaller number far away from the mountain engagements in his troops. How did you know? Judah looked to the man as if it were his unrequited joy to maintain discretion in the matter, Martel, the air of. Judah would demand and sustain, the snake would have in the least one other soul to into Israel precede him and step on land terra firma Jerusalem. It is his hour. It is our hour too. And this one advances deeper inside. On my word today on Tisha B'Av is his mystery over. Only his infamy and despotism does precede this one who doesn't care to shield his own men, so we do persist. So you believe for certain that the prophecy is fulfilled in him, don't you? Judah immediately intimated closer approach after reaching across the seat strap to square his shoulders to Martel, I believe with unpliable confidence that the Lord does himself still speak to men. And I believe further that Israel didn't put us in Israel's army, but God has put us in Israel's army for such a time as this. Oh yes, spoken like a true Maccabees. True that, bro. Judah said, one of his men hugging the pillar, down against the ground, in his clutches with thatches of trouser leg, Judah from out of nowhere grabbing him from the front and yanking him downward and hard, helplessly overtaken. He finally counted the man with that barring boot at his throat again. Through the corridor the men alongside escort alongside the quartered snake through before picking up speed, maintaining stealth mode largely and with hands clashed down over ammo vest and ways to avoid detection, unable to force several out and away from the temple, these few of Master's Confederacy had made it inward. Throngs of persons gathering for the event that's undertaking was strongly encouraged against. The 9th of AV, Tisha B'Av, holding its 4th anniversary in the 3rd temple of those that couldn't be referred to as reconstructions or enhancements, miraculously and commonly was it said, as the temple's finest touch in the constructing of it occurred on the very feast day of Hanukkah, and, 8 days later when she first opened to the people 25th of Kislev. So no sooner had the colour portrait of him faded out of that back door when 200 of NASA's boys had trolled on in, or parachuted down, entering like storming commandos and inside of abject mayhem with the asylum-esque swiney sounds of shrieking uncontainable fury as Emporium Thats clamour and reverberating echo sounded like one a diabolical cacophony with the unchaste terror rhapsody locating some hidden partition to an alien ninth note harmony that both curdled and chilled the blood and spine. Most folk can live the lives of 20, 30 others and not come remotely close to this kind of inundating, pummeling, and beating, cruel and remorselessly bludgeoning. There he was gazing back, in full eye and earshot still, and damn if he, this one who'd attack Rose and looked on not once but twice to experience the temporary experience that was colour imbued sight that's vanquished light he could only know how to live with as an ailment from birth. The man calling himself Padre Pieter Drome Darnus but no Peter, brother of Andrew, Yeshua's servant, was he. On 4 occasions the quartet had visited countries on the wings of Pieter's departure before the sun could acquiesce to twilight's later shade. Somehow he'd spurred the terrific insurrections against governments long formed and intact and at the helm. Serious scarcely did she see him coming, but many were his rebelling sons and daughters in incited hysterics whose materialized there as though overnight. A religious figurehead is sold to do the bidding of fellow religious folk. A Sunni from nearby Saudi Arabia would under his inspiration seek to oust the king there, and politics with the way it wasted this fated final week of Daniel 70 had decided this could mean only great turbulence that itself would transmute to the sand tsunami there before. On another occasion of Pieter's visit and hushed consultation, the Shiite community from Iraq would crest on Pieter's wave after the group receiving him as some esteemed dignitary or royalty defied the suddenly troubled etiquette of an unshorn dynastic loyalty, proceeding to band with troublemaker Iran to stir up quite the sea of uncontainable rage. Who could have expected such of Persia, today's Iran? With tongue planted in cheek the questionnaire. Russia's Alexander Krishnashev braced for what waves might be crashing up north his way as, already steeped in war, rumors of jihadi assaults were sounded and were believed to be imminent and coming to a screamfest theatre near Alexandria's southern Russia province. Certain leaders across the eastern world are in fear for their lives and secretly wondering what kind of a dark electorate this man was from out of his unique chalice cup of magic and vehement storm conjuring. And this unprecedented era of tranquility, following a successful peacetime climate that was suddenly eclipsed by missile lob breaching and as elusive once again as his silvery slit scurrying Mercury to a steel surface against which the globs of it glide, spilling over the table's edge there too. Still out in front, these 4 nations found him a platform of influence that could win him, so-called Northern King, Alexandra, precisely what he was looking for in newfound support abroad. If only the slaughterfest from this wickedly irreverent motley had constituted the absolute horrid worst of it all, because the sight of the human tragedy that paled it in comparison. Blood of the enemy's boot treading forming on the perimeter of where the sloshing stopped only pointed the eye inward. They said it was going to be awful, but they'd stop there. Who is this they? The prophecy bearers. Elijah and Moses. 'Twas the first full day in Jerusalem, for those few cameo appearances. Elijah in his own way lamented before it transpired, saying, "Today Lord's beloved does Saul lament the horror of it all." Speaking hours ahead of what authorities were warned of. Sure, they responded in the small league sent in with Judah, thinking something akin to crowd control and small arms was what the order called for instead of the battalion of sharpshooting Terminator specialists who'd better activate the plan that was to stay active on scene, fully engaged, as military respondents had their dual role to play as veritable escorts and with no certain schedule to keep, became they. Of civilians taken for ransom or temple facilitators who were still more than likely inside of the building, the men were instructed that if they had to fire then to do so as last resort and sparingly if possible unless overtaken or at odds. Hardly expecting battleground to find nucleus and heated zone of, and all places, the temple itself away from the exterior of encasing mount, where they'd hoped to seal off and repel, unto vanquishing the sneak attacks initiated by them. Among the men who entered, heavily guarded by half-dozen armed men, was a so-called man of the hour, himself impressively suited in commander's military garb, this time fit with medals, the debonair man replacing his suited self. He wasn't the only inside the temple but, and easily enough it was too in mind's eye imagine, toggling back in historical time to the campaign for the Maccabees of notoriety against the Syrian troops and madmen Epiphanes put on a deer turned to Temporom who's in the entire coast or the son of Antiochus. He would straightway emulate his hero, that he cut his carbon copy self of preceding him and following. I'll take the shot. I'll take the shot already, I've got him in my scope, quotation mark. You can't. What do you mean I can't? As if it were at all possible to show the pinnacle of anger as though shouting it from a mountaintop, only while in actuality issuing forth a breath that could only dubiously scatter dust from a shelf, and a reddened-faced Jacob chewing forth his hot objection, had just done so. Your crank and barrel's jammed. Try me, shoot over there, go ahead and take a shot at the wall, quotation mark. He commands his otherworldly elements for the hour manifested here on earth, elements of technological nature that Silicon Valley shall alone be able to explain to you. The army doesn't tell us all, my friend. You'd only have to hope to deter him, set him back some by taking out some of his men. Judah myth, you forget my words altogether, repeatedly spoken. Well, if this is that hour, then he at this time shall make it through all of sticks and stones and nuke warfare. You won't dislodge that bullet just now. They'll execute us if we don't take the shot. He aims to push us into the sea, mate. You're mad. They'll execute us. We take out inestimably more if we take him alive. You were briefed on our proceedings, Jake. Look on top of the abandoned altar from the time that they come in and set all that up for the sacrifice ritual. Do you hear that? Do you hear that? Yeah, swine sounds. For his defiling. This is his cue to the other nations comprising his Confederate forces. He's made it through peace into the heart of Jerusalem on the two-state solution pretext. A perfect 3.5 years ago, and he in way of feather-capping his ignoble act of sacrilege and wants you and all else ever aware of this from this, Judah Trail, this son of the mad Syrian Antiochus Epiphanes. Only sounds like a whole herd of them. Where from? We are those ones, Jacob. The military forces to battle the Antichrist and his fated battle royal league from amongst the 10 Confederate leagues. We don't turn a deaf ear to Christian theology. Masterful prophetical marksmen that they've been, and they've turned to on the other side of this, the time of Jacob's trouble. Sorry, Jacob, Judah grimaced at the mere echoing of the name, it's what you called. They turn to speak good tidings in the final prophecies, as do we. Judah breathed mostly to himself, yeah, not kosher. Then, reviving, he said, his heart is set on an intentful defiling. The beast. Reenacting the past, the defiling of it, the temple again and old history repeated on our day. He can't have our souls, so he'll target the dignity in our rituals and distinctive characteristics that set us apart as one people. Jacob pointed to the side of the temple alongside the wall, tapped against Jacob's shoulder with his hand twice. Look, he means to televise it all. He's got men and women bringing in equipment. Get our area all locked down. Shrilling screams of the half a dozen swine intensified in volume that grew and swelled all about the hall, the inner audio decibel fabric shone beyond repair as the animal through the causeway will lead, hurried onward through as had the boar been during the temple's coronation ceremony as televised, individuals neither in temple ceremony garb or military uniform leading the herd as they scurry feverishly backwards, sideways and frontwards in an attempt to keep them on path. The unthinkable but symbolically relevant for only the madman and once cut of his fabric, it was about to transpire. Thanks for attending, gentlemen. Men of the Israeli army, up there, I see you. I also see that you took out many of my men out there. Well, lo and behold, good fortune would have it that you get to join in on the ceremonies. A few dollars go a long way with a fellow leading his herd up the slope behind the temple. My men and me as hungry as we are, and sorry that we had to displace your worshippers, but I, unlike your God's hand staying Abraham's over the child Isaac, I scarcely think my hand shall be stayed by the angel as I receive a sacrifice to my stomach and my army's hunger. Nasser turned and pointed hard at a soldier who'd taken to a knee and pulled his rifle out. No, that would be useless. I wouldn't try that. Listen to your commander, Maccabees up there. The elements are hard against you for this hour and for those to ensue. They'd call in teams to deal with it. The cameras and streaming devices, long having captured the event to the whole universe watching, explained exactly what it was. A virtual world. Streams of audio and video cut from any source as truth divined. A mirror into which all things are reflected, inside because they truly exist, and outside of which nothing exists. Mirrors, shadows, the days of creation and the events strewn upon them. Man is final arbiter deciding incontrovertibly the molecular motion of all things. Before it became warfare it was gamefare, and before it had become gamefare only reality was real, conspicuous for how shadows illuminated existing things instead of existing things becoming for virtue of a virtual world subjected to how manipulable they were. Men before society grew lax until they'd grown disinterested, as questions like how far is too far? Or, because we can, should we, had become passé as signs of a world that would digress instead of progress. How far have the sciences contributed, and how extensively have the arts dignified? In comparison to many things, these were convenient questions, the world contemplating in a time like none other the very real possibility of rumor wars being outdone by what could obliterate even any dwarfed in full-scale war. Pioneers came forward with their advancement ideas having to do with grossly intrusive necessity addresses before people began to wear them as fashion accessories. To summarize, a simple question, at which point to advance, to backscale, as a way to protect advances and to dignify the leaps taken forward for all of non-reality to be subjected to the litmus test. While men were still men instead of an inviolable machine, there was still hope yet, unless, of course, and God forbid, Satan should overtake all things. Watching on several screens as the big drama unfolded with several key personnel comprising the Prime Minister's security ops heads and cabinet alongside military generals and certain aide-de-camp persons. The event somehow intensified as he, in less formal religious garb, entered temple's northernmost side entry. Entering in front of Nasser, who'd himself corralled the herd of swine in before, was seen exactly what he was up to from Headquarters Operations Central's vantage point, and certainly before the truck with several dozen to accompany these four was decaroled to pony on through. Nasser's wretched handiwork with Pieter himself, accompanied by travel aids, the eyes of the men and women fixed on him, who was bedecked in familiar military garb, more so instead of on the man who was said by the many of his own cloth in Vatican Rome to have been responsible for a long list of unconscionables. Not the least of which was this feat where he, under the gunfire cover of the enemy jihadists, entered the very temple as throngs therein who were given the cautionary word that's warning was left unheeded. If they were fortunate, they comprised the many who'd slipped on out while and before flashes of gunfire erupted in this unlikely battle zone. A battalion of me opposing the few with Judah who were suspected by the invaders in the least. One exception to persons who were, in spite of their expecting largely stilling their attention's heated focus on Hussein, was Prime Minister Rosen himself. 'Twas a third eye confounding incident as, here he was again, the Padre Pieter Dromedanis, a French perfume or Italian suit of the man. His more jocular self having said of Pieter only, 'twas he, Pieter, who'd inserted the colorific component to his any observation now. Like those rare fish at sea's bottom, seeming electric in color and contrasting greatly with ocean bedding's corral life, his rich color to persons always knowing it, constituting the remarkable detail, only here was Rosen caught scarcely in bliss between shadow evicting light or emotional ambivalence blinded into seeing by the light of Pieter, as it were. What in Sam Hill hell is he here for? As though willing to extend the past to everyone else. A benediction or Chris Lamassus chant of a prayer. The Prime Minister managed only as though resisting the full burning force of a lancet tip that tube contains a sleep agent. And Hussein directly enters himself. How right they were, as our own Mossad sounded like him for a moment. Together warning of this year's Tisha B'Av, 9th of, he trailed and fell entranced to his captivating black and white internal life became the visual surround sound version of his only audio faculty lasting thrice as long as Rosen labored to keep central focus on the storm camera tapped mic'd sublet rooms to the temple, those rooms filled with lagoon-like smoke set on fire as persons unable to keep pace with throngs of fleeing individuals either escape or join the casualties list. Realizing that the world, Mideast and invariably beyond, had just been forever changed, his revisit with uncommon sight ever preferring only one man as its transmitter he scarcely could make up his mind. Was he a blood-red moon warning sent from Providence or a trick of the devil who was ever distraught over items involving the mere appearance of an iota semblance as the mite on the flea that had any intimating thing to do with rift-lifting or mending motions, even notions, that could usher in unfettered and unfret togetherness consisting, or even peace within quelled divides. Ezekiel's prototype model in the worship area, freshly erected, if we don't get them in there and fast, she unfortunately makes like the warship. Truth in that ghastly consideration leading to our preventive medicine's precaution. Peacetime is over. Seta revived Rosen through a real haunting menace scowl. The fact that he was left off the familiar, ladies and gentlemen tag on that was implied was somehow chilling. There simply could be no doubting his word here, as inwardly his personnel watching along only in vain attempted to, with as much unfiltered colourful zest, albeit darkly hued, catch up to where he was right now. And only then did Pieter Drome Darnus, from full throttle colours emblazoned downscaled to sepia tones, fade into an immersing colour-deficient backdrop. They say that we'd entered the era where randomness itself ceases to exist. Replaced by some concerted melodrama to which, for better or worse, we are helplessly chained. Whatever its colours, blinded by its light, this monstrous thing. Ladies and gentlemen, our new reality, at least under my watch and as long as these retain hearts for terror, it is war. Only until it's over. Without exception, every person in the room numbly responded from 1,000 miles away. We've spread them out and left us thin at home. Get our warriors in here stat. With a vengeance. What the men did see who'd made it out alive of yet another assaulted temple only some 4 years after she'd been erected was non-reality made real. The camera set up to roll helped to feed the reels with some of the act. The four horns said to from forward time looking back represent the most intentfully placed wounds of the Messiah, believed some, the act of touching these off with NASA's substance the world watching in dismay should have seen, the defining of the tabernacle of testimony and the temple entire. In one area of inner temple the cameras were trained also on the basins laying open-mouthed on their sides, the puddle escaping from it and yet to mat against ground, the cameras for live feed, somehow, had panned in hard on this area of floor where, cameras set to truth mode, it wasn't NASA's boots that tread on through but it was, well damn if this couldn't be verified if only the simplest of tests couldn't have been conducted, camera revealed 4 treads marks in 2 men walking through the slop. And damn it was right there for all the world to see, whose hands with these applying blood atop those horns, both sprinkled by hand and emptied out from basins. Cameras panned upward and in, from boot to faces wearing dark smiles and from small containers held at the military uniform's lapel area and out to extended hands whose with ease. To families watching from home, their boys and patriots defending their country. They never quite in their eyes or the eyes of the world looked the same as questions regarding why and what had occurred became deprioritized by the greater consideration and not question in who had done it. One of the first events for a change that NASA would scarcely condemn. Unstrained prediction, World War III had just begun. Warnings were sounded. Few took heed. Hundreds were slain inside the temple that was converted into the ground central war zone. Men and women, each in their conflagrations and with children as victims to suffer the grim fate alongside their parents or to go on to probably rehearse the horror in mind and nauseam ad infinitum with tremendous psychological taunts to bear. The undomesticated but considerably armed animals literally dropped out of the Jerusalem skies, their compatriots stormed side doors and emerged from unearthed tunnels. Just when it was thought that the worst of it might have been the swinefest and the temple floor complex had seemed to of its own accord slip around in gyrating bloody swirl patterns, the mind was stapled fast with eyes glued open on the human tragedy that both collapsed to the floor and raced as the structure's floor seemed to drop like a platform atop of shifting plates and a skirting floor. Truth is, you could scarcely fathom such a thing as this without losing that portion of a relatable self that could, without great effort, get on right. The 3rd Battalion behind Judah and company wouldn't be as prone to being stymied by the gruesome turn of events. Long after the animal had been gutted with entrails and blood spread about the altar and surrounding area, of the many men, disarmed by the transpiration and with countless bodies hooded in crimson red haze and lying lifeless in the temple amid unexpected artillery fire traded for artillery fire. Not one of them had a face that matched Nasser Abu Matter Hussein's own. It sure looked like him. Only then did Judah pin the man with his assault rifle after removing his foot and himself crashing down against the man's chest. Judah's teeth as was the fallen's fully clenched and pushing back the lips and, just as quickly, Judah pumped the shaft of his gun barring against his chest and throat several times before the attacker was out cold. Either dead or playing dead. Jacob, you're under-replenished. Judah, as though bracing to climb up Jacob's body, tugged severely hard against the latter's belt pack and ammo vest, one hand first strapped with a singular burst of released torque as though to pull Jacob's torso lateral to the floor. Come on, as if the man should have through osmosis powers taken to speedy action. My accolades, Jake. You made a child's toy out of his vest, holsters and belts. Haru, this exclamation to which he was shushed and said, sorry. Another weapons confiscation party, man. This is exciting. Still a few more of them here than we thought there'd be, and how fortuitous. Anyone who knows the man can easily detect his sarcastic tone. Seriously, so many of them pushed back outside by the way on their heels like refuse swept over into the Kidron Valley, maybe. It was a second wave in Judah and his team as the troops leading the way treated arms fire with small munitions and quotation mark immediately sending NASA's 1st Brigade on hot on retreat. Still, hand grenades were heard popping off in the distance in a harmonizing battle chant choreographed to the rally cries. I think the heat's gotten to these. How to explain it? Yeah, they present themselves as gifts to us, as expecting to encounter only worshippers, and then no sooner had we. Behind you, Judah. The man, who was at least as large as Reuben on an all-out blitz for the men, similarly stripped clear of his weapons and as with the others of Masters in somehow left alone to encounter Judah and Jacob. On his face several of laceration, looks like a knife was taken to him, the scuffle against ground. Judah was sent remorselessly hard to the ground, his knee impacted as his only bracing support that it sent a flood of shock waves to his brain. To his own surprise, heat of his own accord slammed from knees to butt against ground and jackknifing sideways. He used same leg to on one move dexterously make like hinge work swivel when he swept the man with remarkable speed as he sounded those tremendous and terrible audio decimating glass shattering shrieks, as his choice weapon of reliable choice as he ever make like a down low wingman in hockey, hovering just in front of the goaltender's net with one left to wonder if he was subconsciously rooted or entrenched in coercion or habit, psychologically unnerving a man. It was both. His cousin Joel Weber, while watching alongside Judah's then commander, who he would later replace, and with the former conducting one with the earth drills, as Joel referred to them, Maccabeus' chest outward sprawling and clawing at red earth and with remarkable dexterity kicking as if he were the swimmer conducting butterfly drills instead of the soldier during less glamorous boot camp trials, propelling himself toward an imagined enemy, chin barely above the ground as he digged, face forward and writhing and somehow still clutching firmly and using the butt of his rifle as though to allow more graceful treading of soils as waters, digging and booting in with clumps of earth overhead as though from a threshing flywheel flying. While watching his younger cousin and standing arms crossed, mirroring the commander's posture, who himself was chatting with the regiment's portly and barrel-chested brigadier general, uproariously laughed when snarled, "Same general, the man's a real animal." I think maybe from youth watching Bruce Lee feature movies and ever wishing to emulate him, even if only subconsciously out here today. Louder since you show up. Gurn, it up for ya, I think. To which Job said, "It's good." You detect him from miles away, knowing full well who he is, which only makes his deafening silence all the more a weapon, the way I see it. He'll advantage that soon. My word on it. HTE back of his opponent's helmeted head driving his hard in the ground as had Judah's very mean then hammer driven against ground. The man almost twice as wide as Judah given his one-way ticket aboard the Maccabees train, when the latter, still thrice as strong in pure girth to this man's clunky burly, on a pair of steamrollers was he from shoulder chug against the good cutting ground. Judah, scarcely from forward momentum assisted, he would create his own momentum at the end of his speedy reverse motion trail has a raised for the second level banister over this, or matters of all kinds. I swear to you the earth does rarely atop of the needlehead situate and spin her transferable kinetic energies are at our disposal on demand. Quotation mark Judah would say this while leading martial arts drills and beyond boot camp, fairly well send off. Judah at the end of his backpedaling preferring the crawl and leg lever piston kick usage this time when, wonderfully under the man he with agility disappear with his back to the ground before it used his boot against chest to easily hurl the soldier upward and down to join lower level festivities. He was out cold down there, I swear you won't forget it. Ha. If you ever meet me, Papa, Judah labored to catch his wind, flat hand assessing against his vest to make certain that his weaponry was firm intact while still more than likely over his own generated excitement hyperventilating something fierce while taking a more scrutinizing glance at his downed enemy, some 40 to 50 feet down below in the new temple facility and seeming that he might himself tip on over the banister, continuing, I swear I'll drill you hard if you let slip that I finally, sounded like a shot went off behind them toward which both men looked, if you tell him or mum too that I showed up at temple only to catapult a man over up a balcony and veranda wrap around down to his death. Jacob, to whom he speak, was doubled over and hovering over top of his own opponent, leaning from standing position and laboring to catch his own breath, with his boots at either side of this combatant's waist and from waist to forehead he towered and was parallel to the man's own with eyes wide open and appearing as if he'd met with the piercing end of a stylus extracted from a hallucinogenic agent, lifelessly staring at Jacob and only under dizzying arrest flashing his eyes. Did you see that? Judah asked in a tone of hilarity and then swelling composure, that's coupling only he could pull off where it seemed to be the purposeful aim that was to utilize sensory aware only in tandem with accentuated situational aware. Thrice imposing as Jacob with blood on his hands only shook his head slowly from side to side, into its sheath slipping his knife again while briskly reviving in an attempt to shake off discombobulating woos as he shake his head, dispelling a bout of disorientation. You better go ahead and sidestep him, Jake. Appears to be a slab of meat, however, you can never be too. Judah's prediction reminding of his gainful intuition when the down man's leg kicked with tremendous force meeting squarely with Jacob's manliness and genitalia as Jacob recoiled and had more than just exertion to overcome as a soldier as the forest ground cedar timbered sideways, Judah, both men wrangling into the ground crashing before making it to their feet again. Jacob called his combatant on, remaining silent but fully expressive and detailed in his invite, together these making like intentful lines of prey facing off pre-pounce, nearing each other and measuredly closing the gap between them before their snake-like approach forward become a sideways stepping dance, circling like squaring sumo wrestlers. They remained one on the other blinklessly transfixed while holding penetrating double dare stares focusing like premeditating daggers clutched overhead or like eyes laser beams that shoot from their convulsing and breathing eye orbs and that pondering anticipation of execution based on a deeper thought that itself was contained within an attaché that's articles with surnamed plethora of alternatives, the resurfacing and game deciding play. Come on now, come on, I dare you. Jacob gave articulation to what their taunting gesturing without words said, extended hands and rolling palms in collision with convulsing and constricting chest and shoulders seeming to all the more intimate, adding to the suspenseful tension. Looks like my mate here bloodied you up handily, it looks like you have a few more breaths left in you. To which Judah's dance partner sneered, veins bulging, at least. Feigning commitment to an early start with a decoy shift and duck, with chest torn frozen shoulder stabs, then, again the unthinkable, Judah lost all tension after checking inward left and then balcony right twice, the second time only through his eyes impulsively assessing while thrusting with his head straight and forward, careful not to lose sight of the man's shoulders. He about face reversed with arms wrapped across his chest, oddly turning to present himself as, with the exception of whistling lips on still on a disinterested stroll, the easy takedown victim and target, again the man replete with taunt motions and psychological machinations. The bewildered man stopped only 2 storming steps away from Judah several steps ahead of him in the direction to which he suddenly stared toward the banister as though to recalibrate and reassess situation, stunned by the man presenting himself as voluntary prisoner and expendable asset against self-interest. What? You have eyes in the back of your head, or did thunder strike back there? No, but you do. Judah snarled. The shots fired from the right side rear, the reports under motoring cadence from the open area yet capable of offering ruminating consultation in reference to what and from when this shot was fired. No, but you do. Judah repeated, letting another shrieking exclamation ride the inside temple's acoustical bless and reverberating echo again, adding while turning toward the general area of the triggerman, the latter appearing like a spider within a web of glass with tawny toward brown-yellowy light of premature dusk inside creeping and suffusing. The shooter from where he on a higher rise hunkered down had his gun still fixed in position before he stood up from the ornate inside of concave dome where moving shadows enliven and seep from where he took the shot with the splaying protrusions and suffusing splaying fingers of the new basilica-type edifice spiraling down to another winding staircase set. Thanks, mate. If you aren't with an OP's assignment already, you shall tomorrow be, on my word. That fiendish bullet whistling just over my head with my name on it for sure. We need more sharpshooters. My friend, I see you fully trusted. Mop the floor with him, responded the shooter. And to see him, Judah Mac trailed, more fully examining the man's uniform in stripes down at his feet, another Russo, looks like, damn shame. And to see him off ahead of an invite or death angel to the proverbial world to come. Great shot, man. Damn right I trusted you. Close range, so could have shot through closed eyes, I think. Martel had entered on the second-level balcony, psychologically impacted by what he'd just seen. Touching his hands repeatedly to his head, pacing wildly about after seeing the two men, he said hysterically, Jacob. Jude, can you believe this? Can you believe this whatever he is, Satan on earth? The man didn't respond to him, only other than Jacob, who'd in disbelief, looked helplessly to him, and, when he approached, the nearer Judah lay there motionless, blood on his hands and seeping from the corner of his mouth. Only, 'twas the look in eyes that you didn't have to peer into to know that beneath those closed lids the proverbial lights weren't on. Judith, while engaged in close-quarter combat, flashed his glimpse to the great massacre, as short history would go on to name it, that had overtaken the first level where under short-circuiting lights the rampage trampling down the attendees had occurred. 'Twas very much like an arena fire overtaking throngs, only this was blood spill as the ravaging flames and infernal hell. Judith mouthed to himself, feeling like he was on the verge of passing out, gaping holes from the stolen utility vehicles slamming through on each side, the shrieking pigs over top of which we hear, the people shrieking and in panicky hysterics running for those new exits. For a time we couldn't hear anything else up here. Ghastly cries we shan't ever forget. As a result of stealing away like that, he'd surrendered himself to an opponent, one watching from a distance when with remarkable dexterity Judah had fallen backwards, on a roll with his legs jettisoning the man perilously groundward and over the balcony. Smeon shouted, he's hit. He's hit. Other IDF soldiers filled in, having catapulted themselves over the banister separating a seating area from a long stretch of hall. Man down. Platoon charge Judah Maccabees down. One of the soldiers radios in from his handheld talkie. We can't be taken alive, man. Judah Mac. Hey, you heard me. Gather yourself just the two. Judah, damn it. And Jacob viciously slammed one of his fists into his awaiting palm, not once but twice, while stealing maniacal glances around him, only dubiously assessing the environment. He fell hard to his knees, allowed his shoulders to buckle while as best he could resisting hysterics only by allowing himself to from down kneecaps to torso and head cease from swaying like a winded reed just to collapse atop of him, screaming a lamentable yelp with his face ratchet sore as his sobs quickly segued to something almost bringing to mind an injured animal. Still he managed with his chin pressed against Judah's battle vest to turn his head askance, staring up toward Judah's face with his teeth a-rattle and facial aspect contorting, the hell out of here, got to, Judah. Despite himself Jacob mustered. Judah said, you know that, even now was the heartfelt testimony teeming in his barely audible words, with each one spoken more blood trickled forth from his mouth corners, while inserting the considerable pauses, every 5 strangulated watery words or so, they, the jihadists, they enter, holding the Quran in one hand, and, in the other is the evidence of it, great bloodshed. He only appeared to put on a trace of a smile when completed he, coughing and choking once, angling his head to one side and then front and center reframing him again. In his eyes his mates noted the reflection from overhead lighting the glimmer in his sopping red corpuscled eyes, and here comes we choose to remind that kind of commitment pales in comparison to our own commitment to life. Fight for her valiantly, my brothers. They said, if for nothing else than to vindicate his memory, and especially Reuben who'd slung him over his shoulder as easily as could he a 100-pound sack, promised to avenge Judah whereas the militias opposing them in the most dramatic manner possible, they promised to avenge the Israel's valiant crushing counter-offensive and would award in time, and on the allure of enticing benefits that seemed to at least on paper and in theory only what should serve the all that the man Hussein could desire, he and his partner droned Darnus climbing out of obscure pretenses when, in an instant, retiring their thatches of sheep's dress for war. Fool me once, fool me twice. Well, this was thrice, and the Mideast world had to on the tip a Damocles sword that swung amusically like a menacing pendulum with cutting-edge exactitude rolling out the big reveal. No, scarcely just another day. Scarcely was this a day gone so unconscionably bad with a frolicking demon's tail and scales attached, everybody knew what time it was, only the question was put forth asking the question just for whom is its portion spilled with such dynasty-devouring prophecies of fateful finality on record left incomplete. Damn right, they'd just stirred the mighty lion. They'd infiltrated well beyond the border to inherit what they'd dished out. These ones setting out to entrench in a moat set around her, defying even spearheading Ayatollah's order to again to only fortify outskirts lest their holy site, second or third only to Mecca, get lampooned. Still he scarcely only landed upon Abu Monster Hussein, they invented their kingmaker. Was Weber's cousin Judah Maccabee's breathless infuriating rant. For better, for worse, it was now time. It was the time of Jacob's trouble.
All rights are reserved. Eli James, 2023. Today's August 4th, 2025. Title 70, The Time of Jacob's Trouble, Planet Earth's Generation Gog-Mageddon. Soon available on audio, hardcover, ebook, and paperback.